The island placement strategic meta. This is one of my absolute favorite topics in Pirate CSG, competitive optimization from thinking through options and deciding on a best course of action. It's a bit more theory and less experience based than I usually go for, but it's real fun for me to think about. These snippets come from the Pirate CSG Discord server, and I hope to add more over time. So this video is based on the standard rules for a 1v1, so 2-player, 40-point game. Likely this kind of thinking would only come up in a competitive environment. So the combined setup rules, or the complete game rules, I should say, under placing islands says, for a 40-point game, players must use 3 islands per player, 6 islands for 2 players, 9 islands for 3 players. If you don't have enough islands, use similarly sized and shaped objects to represent them. Starting with the first player, players take turns randomly choosing an island and placing it on the play area. Islands must be placed at least 3L, but not more than 6L from each other. And then it goes into some stuff about mysterious islands, and you can also choose to play with them as regular islands with no special effects. So anyway, I'm not going to concentrate on mysterious islands in this video, but they do add yet another wrinkle to the fold here, and this whole strategic meta idea. So the player who goes first chooses the location of the first island. The second player chooses the location of the final island because they choose the location of island number 6. And that one, they can play 6L away from the island in play that is already in the most remote location. Then the second player chooses the home island location of the first player, which at that point, why not put the first player as far away as possible? So it makes it seem like the optimal standard setup would pretty much always have at least one island farther out than all the rest, or would even make the island placement look a lot less the typical circle or pyramid shape I'm very accustomed to seeing, since people often default to placing islands no more than 3L away from other islands. That often happens in casual games. I think the follow-up is, does an island placement meta emerge where because player 1 knows they will be placed 6L away from an island to start the game, do they place their second and third islands, the third and fifth overall to be placed out of the 6, the maximum distance 6L away from other islands, because they know they will have to place player 2 at an island that would otherwise be closer? It is suddenly obvious that they will want all the islands to be 6L apart to minimize their relative distance to getting gold compared to player 2. And of course, that also brings up the issue of speed, because player 1, if they do that, they're going to want to make sure they have a fast fleet. If they have a slow fleet, it might just be bad for them no matter what. But of course, in a competitive environment, which this would mostly only apply to that kind of thing, they probably would have a very fast fleet. This could also exacerbate the existing issue of speed being the most important attribute in the game along with extra actions. If both players are well aware that one of them will start the game 6L away from the nearest wild island, if not both, they're almost forced to build speed fleets that attempt to make up for such a distance, which results in more high-paying Banshee's Cry, Lord Micron type fleets. This in turn forces the other player to build a more competitive fleet as well, and results in even less average or below average ships and crew from being used. So along with that, with the setup rules, you would see the ships you're going up against, but you'd have to make educated guesses on the crew. That's where experience and having a somewhat encyclopedic knowledge of the game pieces could come in handy. A bunch of face-down crew in the high peng and a potential Micron ship like the Patagonia is a pretty decent bet you'll be seeing some crazy S plus L plus S plus L times 2 stuff going on in the game via extra actions. But opponents could also bluff what their crew setups are, or just lie about what they have, which gets into the strategic elements I'm also thinking about. And I'll make sure to include a link in the description to my strategic elements post that's pretty long and in-depth, and hopefully a really fun read for anybody that likes the competitive elements of this game and would love to learn more about it and kind of go a deep dive down the rabbit hole into the strategy behind Pirates. When you go as deep as the rabbit hole goes, you can even say everything is playing the game. Even what you said to the player prior to meeting up, bluffing that you're using a casual fleet and saying the roommate took your tin by accident that morning. I might lose competitive games in the future because I'm bringing this topic up right now. I just think if you reverse engineer this meta or go backwards, Player 1 realizes that we'll have terrible positioning either way. Even if the first 4 islands are set up in a square 6L apart, like you see here, and Player 1 puts the 5th island 6L away from a corner of the square for their 5th island overall, and the 3rd and final island that Player 1 places, Player 2 can still place island number 6, the last island, which they know will be Player 1's home island if they're trying to put them as far away as possible. They can still place that 6L away from the square in the same direction. So Player 1 would want some powerful ships to stop Player 2 from getting gold home. This could even affect fleet building for everyone involved. If you know you'll get screwed with a gold fleet in Player 1 position, both players might just hedge their bets and bring loaded fleets with minimal points invested in gold running. One of the biggest counters to all this is the Hidden Cove event, and this is kind of the great equalizer in this situation. It would be wise to have one on hand for any competitive tournament, as it's easily added to a fleet via a 0 LR plus 5 crew. Player 1 might be more likely to include it in their selection in order to skip the 6L distance with one of their ships. Continuous play with the meta might also lead to a player considering the use of a crew like Calypso to generate whirlpools near home that lead straight to Wild Islands. However, Calypso is 6 points, so she's not able to be brought in after the island meta is finished because she's too many points to bring in via those plus 5 crew. Terrain is vastly harder to talk strategy about and theorize a meta around simply because it's far more variable than the islands. So many types of terrain and so many places they can go on the ocean. So I'm not going to get into all that right now. So one of the counters to my idea from earlier is that Player 1 could anticipate Player 2 placing the final island as far away as possible and therefore would likely place Island 5 in the middle after that 6L square is completed for the first 4 islands. Then Player 2 picks the final location 6L off a corner of the area, which they choose as the Player 1 home island. And then Player 1 might want to include whirlpools at this point. The rules don't specify about agreeing on the type of terrain, so players would potentially just bring a lot of everything and base their choices on whether they go first or second, and whether or not the full island meta plays itself out. Player 1 can now try to make other islands more appealing for Player 2 to choose this Player 1's home island. By putting whirlpools near a faraway island, it could make Player 2 think twice about making that Player 1's home island. So maybe this all circles back to the official home island selection choice rule being quite good overall, arguably. That's certainly up for debate. Player 2 knows they can put Player 1's home island wherever they want. They can place it near their own home island with the full intention of blasting away on their turn, which is essentially the end of round 1, because they had home island protection, can't be shot out while docked to your home island, while Player 1 doesn't as they move their ships out, unless they keep ships there and likely forfeit actions as Player 1. This could also dramatically impact terrain type selection and placement by Player 1 because they know they're going first and will have their home island chosen by Player 2. If they think P2 will blast them in round 1, it could benefit them to place fog banks near as many islands as possible so they can hide in them for protection right after the game starts if necessary. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. This is one of my favorite topics around Pirate CSG, the strategic meta. This is something that most casual players don't encounter because it's just not something they would think about, but when you go down the rabbit hole as deep as possible, like I did a few years ago, you start to realize that the setup rules are designed to be done in order. So you create your fleet first, then you choose events, then setup, then placing islands, then placing terrain, then choosing home islands. And you don't even place crew until after home islands are chosen, which is actually quite interesting. And then you place equipment after crew, and then you place treasure last. So you could even base your treasure contributions on everything else. You could have modular treasure selections that you swap in or out based on how many crew you see in the opposing fleet, where their home island is, whether or not you're Player 1 or Player 2, and things like that. That's something that is so deep that I've even not thought about that too hard, only a little bit in tournament number 3, which I played in the first half of 2024. But anyway, maybe there's a treasure meta that could be discussed at a future time. So anyway, feel free to comment, like, subscribe, and leave your thoughts on what you think of the island placement strategic meta, if you used it, and how your competitive Pirate CSG experiences have gone overall, whether or not you played in tournaments at stores back in the day, if you've done any competitive stuff on Vassal, or if you'd like to get into the competitive 1v1 40-point games in the future just because you haven't done it before. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in more Pirates content.